In 1943, Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague, a Jewish lawyer, and his wife, Iris, are at a send-off party. Ewan is giving a speech in honor of Iris, which surprises her as their relationship is somewhat shaky. Iris was Jewish. Hence, as a precautionary measure, Ewan will send her with their children to America because World War II is deeply entrenched in the United Kingdom. When the 20 committee appoints Ewan to join them, he simultaneously announces that he'll retire from law practice. Ewan's devoted secretary, Hester Leggett, comes with him. On the other hand, Admiral John Godfrey and Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming meet with Winston Churchill. Churchill promised the United States that the Allies would invade Sicily by July of that year to push northward into Europe. However, Sicily is considered an obvious target, and the Wehrmacht may be defending it. Godfrey informs the 20 committee that Britain must trick Nazi Germany into believing the Allies will invade Greece. Godfrey and Fleming wrote a memo known as the Trout Memo in 1939. It dealt with deception techniques such as luring Axis U-boats and ships to minefields, spreading wrong plans through spy networks, and placing misleading secret documents. On number 28 of that memo, it talks about placing misleading, confidential documents on the dead floating corpse of the officer. Fleming wanted to use this in real life, but Churchill thought it needed to be more impressive. However, his plan to attack in July was solid, so he gave tacit permission. Charles Chumley, a flight lieutenant who has always lived in the shadow of his older brother, suggests an operation from the Trout Memo. He wants to involve a dead body washing up on shore with false information. Despite Godfrey's doubts, he gives Ewan and Charles permission to plan the operation with Fleming, and they call it Operation Mincemeat. Then, they started their operation by picking Greece as their fake target. They spread rumors through spy networks, bought Greece's currency, food, and weapons, and started making it seem like Greece was their next target. After that, the 20 committee chose Spain for dumping the body as it was a neutral country and easy to disguise. Meanwhile, Ewan and Charles set up an office. As planning gets underway, they need a near-perfect body and find a guy called Glyndŵr Michael, who's originally from Wales and died in a suicide by consuming rat poison. They thought this body was perfect for their plan because he had no family listed. Still, they need to move fast because they only have 3 months before the body decomposes. Later, they're at an officers' club where one bar attendant named Teddy offers them a drink. They then decided they would give the dead body the false identity of William Martin, who would have the rank of major and be directly reporting to Ewan. They finalize his background, parents, address, and bank account. Hester then proposes for the body to have a love letter. Still, Ewan disagrees with it because he thinks romance is unnecessary. But Charles insisted on having a wife to build credibility, then Ewan agreed. The next day, Charles asks his colleague, Jean Leslie, a widowed secretary in the office, to be part of the operation. He wanted her to be Martin's fictitious wife, to which Jean agrees and gives him her 20-year-old photograph, which her husband took while on holiday. After she agrees, she asks for a seat at the table to know the entire operation. Charles is romantically interested in Jean, so it makes him happy, and he decides to name the fictitious wife, Pam. Meanwhile, to make the ID accurate, they dressed up the corpse like a Royal Marine and tried to take photos. Unfortunately, it was unsuccessful, so they searched for other guys who might resemble him. They then chose Jean's boyfriend, Sergeant Roger Dearborn, from America. Without giving him many details, they took his photograph to make a fake ID of Major William. For the next few days, the group builds a solid background for Major William, where Jean and Ewan worked together to develop good ideas. They then became good friends and attended a couple of parties together. Soon, gossip starts to spread in the office, stating an affair between the two, causing Charles to rattle. After that, Charles gave Godfrey the status report on the investigation and told him that they could now provide it to Churchill. Godfrey suspects Ewan's brother, Ivor Montague, is working with the Russians. Afterward, Godfrey presents the plan to Churchill, who's not pleased with it. He asks what type of ink they will use on the papers. Since they're drowning the body, ordinary ink will get erased. But if they used ink that doesn't dissolve in water, the enemy would have known it was a fake because no one uses that kind of ink for regular letters. After that, Godfrey states that MI5 is now working on that. Then, Churchill gave the order to the Admiral to make Operation Mincemeat as foolproof as possible because it was just one part of a much larger series of operations. Back in the office, Ewan and Charles encounter another problem. The sister of the dead guy is demanding the body for the service. The hospital staff then informs her about her brother's demise. After knowing she's poor, Fleming tries to bribe her, but it makes her furious, and she threatens to go to the police against them. Ewan then forced her to accept that her brother was now doing something for the country that would save tens of thousands of lives, and he refused to give the body. The lady thought they were experimenting on her brother's body and hoped God would do justice to his soul. After a while, the UK naval attaché in Madrid, Captain David Ainsworth, with his assistant, Gomez, arrived for the briefing. Ewan then explained the plan to them that they would release the body with the papers through a submarine near Huelva, the coast of Spain, under Officer Gomez's territory. He'll say that Major Martin died in a plane crash and washed up on the shore. Adolf Kloss, a German spy at Huelva that they're counting on to get the evidence to the Germans, will report to Karl Kuhlenthal. According to MI5, Kuhlenthal is an espionage disaster, one-quarter Jewish. Therefore, he'll do anything to prove his German pureblood loyalty. Once Kuhlenthal gets the paper, he will forward it to Colonel Alexis von Rohen, Hitler's right-hand man on intelligence. There's a persistent rumor that the colonel is hatching a plan to overthrow Hitler, but MI5 asserts that he lacks reliable sources. However, if the stories are accurate, they will take action based on this information, or Kuhlenthal will be aware of the deception. Ewan then asks Ainsworth and Gomez to ensure that Kuhlenthal sees the papers. The secret document that Major Martin was supposed to carry was a letter from General Archie Nye to Harold Alexander instructing him to prepare for Greece's attacks. Ewan prepared 14 drafts of this letter, but none was approved. Finally, he approached General Nye and asked him to write the fake letter himself, which made Godfrey consent to the operation. Then, Hester wrote the love letter. Not long after, Charles receives a package from 1005 containing Ivor's history, indicating that he might be a Russian spy. Godfrey orders him to spy on Ewan and Ivor. In return, he'll locate and return the remains of his brother, who gets killed in action in Chittagong, Bengal. Charles reluctantly agrees. Meanwhile, they placed an eyelash in the letter so they would know if the Germans opened it and then sealed it. They're aware that the plan has a chance of not working because anything could happen at sea, such as the water may float the paper and the body in different directions. However, despite this uncertainty, they still decided to stick with the plan. They then placed all the other documents and prepared for their transport. Specialist MI5 driver St. John, Jacques, Horsford transports Ewan, Charles, and the corpse to the RN submarine base in Holy Loch. On their way, Charles told Ewan about Godfrey's suspicion about Ivor. Still, Ewan dismissed them by saying his brother wasn't a spy. Charles then loaded the corpse onto the submarine HMS Seraph under the command of Lieutenant Bill Jewell. The Seraph arrives in the Gulf of Cadiz early on April 30 and drops the body into the water. The next day, a few fishermen in Huelva, Spain, caught the body and informed the local Navy officers. A local naval officer offered off the record, handing over a body and documents to Gomez as a mark to prove neutrality in this war. But Gomez needed it to travel up the command to Madrid so that Kuhlenthal could look at it. However, the local naval officer refused because their local forensic expert had died. Hence, the Spanish Navy asked a drowning expert from Madrid to do the autopsy. The expert started the autopsy and recovered a dead snake from Major Martin's body. Still, nobody knew how it got in there. Gomez then convinced the expert to cancel the examination and label it as drowning, then the expert followed. On the other hand, Charles called Ainsworth on an unsecured line and asked him to get those papers as soon as possible. Klaus taps Ainsworth's lines, so he now hears this and later informs Kuhlenthal about the message. While in Huelva, a funeral took place for Major Martin. Back in London, Sergeant Roger says goodbye to Jean as he ships on the next boat. At the same time, the papers finally land at Spanish Admiral Moreno's table, who was hesitant to show them to Kuhlenthal, so he insisted that he had no papers. Since Ainsworth had bugged Kuhlenthal's lines, he knew he was furious. Kuhlenthal desperately wanted those papers as he was getting calls from Berlin. Ainsworth took the help of Spanish double agent Colonel Cerruti in one last attempt to get the documents to Kuhlenthal. He promised Cerruti remuneration, but trust wasn't associated with him, so there was no guarantee that he would do the job. A couple of days later, Moreno handed over the papers to Ainsworth, claiming Spain was neutral. By the look of it, it was uncertain whether they opened the letter. So, Ewan and Charles checked it and found that the eyelash was missing, implying someone had seen it and most probably made copies of it. When Jean returned to her house one night, she found her photograph beside the lamp. Then, the bar attendant, Teddy, appears with a gun, threatening her and asking for everything, for he claims to be a spy for an anti-Hitler plot within Germany. He said that there were good Germans who were trying to bring down Hitler. For that, they need to know the truth. Jean then told him half the truth, and she said the officer was indeed carrying secret documents but her being his wife was false. After Teddy leaves, Jean informs Ewan and Charles, who are furious at the security breach. They knew who the spies were and who the sympathizers were, yet they failed to detect Teddy. The next day, they get the news that the Germans are retrieving. General Edel had ordered troop buildup at Greece. Charles and Ewan felt relieved and theorized that Rohen sent Teddy to verify information so von Rohen could undermine Hitler. However, Godfrey is still determining if the deception has worked. He says he would have postponed the invasion if he had his way. Still, Churchill was adamant and promised the Americans a July attack. Montague then takes Jean to his home for protection, but she accepts a job in special operations and soon leaves London. On July 10, 1943, Allied forces attacked Sicily. They put the invasion fleet together and told the US to break through Licata Beach while the British set up the sonar homing buoy to help guide the others. The news arrives that the Allied forces suffered limited casualties, and the enemy is retreating. Because of minimal resistance, they're successful in holding the beaches. Afterward, Charles admits he received his brother's remains in return for spying on Montague. Feeling sympathetic and relieved that Operation Mincemeat was a success, he offers to buy Charles a drink, even though it's only 8 in the morning, and they talk about how the glory will go to those who did it, not to them. Later, they revealed that the operation saved many lives. Later, Charles and Ewan became good friends and celebrated their success in silence. Charles stayed with 1001st 5 until 1852, later married, and traveled widely. At the same time, Ewan reunited with Iris after the war and remained married. Jean then married a soldier while Hester continued as director of the Admiralty Secretarial Unit. They hid Major William Martin's identity for nearly 50 years. They only revealed it in 1997 when they added an epitaph with his real name to his headstone in Spain. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.